December 31st, 1944. One German miscalculation turned Hitler's last winter offensive into a costly disaster, unraveling plans in Alsace and costing countless lives. In this episode today, we reveal the critical error, the battlefield consequences, and how Allied forces exploited it. If you want more hard-hitting World War II stories, subscribe to our channel to encourage us to continue.
Snow and biting cold covered American foxholes in the Vosges and the Alsace plain as GI wristwatches ticked down the last hours of December 31st, 1944, awaiting the German attack. In their positions, American soldiers peered northward toward German West Wall fortified positions, into heavy woods, or tried to catch some sleep. Nobody felt like celebrating the opening of 1945 on the thin American lines. There was no reason to. Hundreds of miles to the north, two German panzer armies were slugging it out in the Ardennes with American and British forces in the Battle of the Bulge. Now Lieutenant General Jacob Devere's U.S. 6th Army Group had been forced to stretch its lines west to cover those of the U.S. 3rd Army, which had been pulled off its offensive into the Saar to drive north to relieve the siege of Bastogne.
The 6th Army Group, consisting of two armies, had to take over. The French 1st Army dug in around the Colmar Pocket in Lorraine, and the United States 7th Army, under Lieutenant General Alexander Sandy Patch, was tasked with holding the Rhine River from Strasbourg to the German border and westward. That length was 64 kilometers along the Rhine and nearly 140 facing the Saar. Worse, Patch's army was thin, overstretched, short of 9,000 replacements, lacking reserves, and at the bottom of supply priorities because of demands from the Bulge. Some of Patch's men were wearing cast-off British, Canadian, and even captured German winter coats. Still worse, few of its troops were veterans. The 100th Century Infantry Division, a new outfit, was all draftees. The 70th Infantry Division had completed training only 2 months ago. 3 American divisions had been sent into the line without their artillery and supporting vehicles, simply to hold the ground on the near side of the Rhine. Patch's best infantry divisions were the 36th Texas Division and the 45th Thunderbirds, which had fought through Sicily and Italy before invading southern France in August and through the Rhone Valley up to Alsace. It was not all bleak for Patch, who had advantages in air supremacy, good intelligence, and the fact that his troops occupied some of the abandoned earthworks and fortifications of the legendary Maginot Line. The Germans had stripped much of its equipment, even cook stoves, after their 1940 victory, but they couldn't remove the tunnels, tank traps, and other defenses, or the heavy guns, which all faced Germany and were soon put to good use. As 1944 came to a close, the big question was, what would the Germans do? Adolf Hitler's answer came on December 22nd when he told his top commando, SS Colonel Otto Skorzeny, "We are going to launch a new attack in the Alsace."
The German assault would involve 2 forces, Army Group Oberrhein, commanded by SS Reichsfuhrer Heinrich Himmler, wearing one of his many hats. He was an unsuccessful general, believing that this task purely consisted of reviewing troops and presenting medals. His army group was deployed from the Swiss border to Scheibenhardt, where the French border diverged from the Rhine, and the West Wall's fortifications turned west and included the 19th Army in the Colmar Pocket. From there, Germany's defenses were manned by Army Group G under General Hermann Balck, who would be replaced by General Johannes Blaskowitz just before the offensive. Hitler's plan, codenamed Nordwind, called for a 3-pincer assault on the exposed Bulge of the 7th Army. The German 1st Army, under General Hans von Opskelder, would attack on the German right. This army was organized into 3 corps, the 13th SS, the 82nd, and the 90th, comprising 9 divisions. The 13th SS Corps included 2 of the supposedly toughest divisions in the German inventory, the 17th SS Panzer Grenadier Division, Gotz von Berlichingen, and the 6th SS Mountain Division, transferred from Finland when that nation left the war. The 6th Division's men were young and fit, unlike the Wehrmacht units alongside them, but it had long been led by ill-trained party activists, with commanding officers reporting drunk. Even so, Keith Bond, an American historian of the Vosges campaign, wrote that it was undoubtedly the best German infantry formation on the entire Western Front in early January 1945. Colonel Felix Sparks, an officer in the 45th, said the 6th SS were the best men we ever ran into, extremely aggressive and impossible to capture. There was no driving them out, for they fought until they were killed.
Named for a German robber baron from the Middle Ages, the 17th SS Panzergrenadier Division was also a mess. It was formed in France and consisted of Germans, Romanians, and renegade Belgians. Most of them were killed at St. Lo, and replacements were marginal. The division's chief abilities were torturing and murdering both French civilians and captured American military medical personnel. Flung into battle at Metz, it was mauled again. The division's elitism and equipment were gone. The 29-year-old division commander, SS Colonel Hans Lingner, was considered incompetent by his superiors. But behind this questionable force were three tough divisions that had endured years of war: the 11th and 21st Panzer, and the 25th Panzergrenadier. The 21st had faced the British on D-Day, stopping them from reaching Caen. However, like every German division in the war by this point, they were short of ammunition, guns, fuel, and replacements. The Germans considered three approach routes for Nordwind: through open country to the west of the Vosges Mountains, through the American salient at the Lauter River, and straight down through the lower Vosges Mountains. Obstfelder recommended that his troops attack straight down the lower Vosges Mountains, from Bitche to Saverne. Very few American forces held that area, and some of those Maginot positions were in German hands, reducing risks. It was a southern version of the Bulge offensive. But Hitler wasn't sold. For all his faults as a military leader, he had been an infantryman, and he did not believe his mechanized troops could drive down the backbone of a range of mountains and forests. He ordered a major effort west of the Vosges by the 13th SS Corps and the main attack east of the Vosges by the Panzer forces.
Deployed against this were two American corps: Major General Wade Hayslip's 15th west of the Vosges with the 44th, 100th Infantry, Task Force Harris, and 12th Armored Divisions, the latter in reserve, as well as a combat command, the equivalent of a brigade group of the 2nd French Armored Division, the strongest outfit in the Free French Army. Well equipped, motivated, and trained, the 2nd Armored enjoyed the dynamic leadership of General Philippe Leclerc, one of the earliest officers to join General Charles de Gaulle's Free French Forces in 1940. He and his men preferred operating with the Americans rather than their countrymen, as the French First Army was largely made up of French forces that had supported Vichy from 1940 to 1942, and then the Allies. In French Army barracks and officers' messes, there was a great deal of tension between Gaullists and former Pétainists. Though the 44th and 100th lacked combat experience, 75 and 47 days respectively, they were far better trained and equipped than their German opposition. On the right, Major General Albert Brooks' 6th Corps covered the vast tract of land from the High Vosges to the Rhine River. The 36th and 45th Infantry Divisions were dug in on the Franco-German border with a motley group of tanks and armored cars called Task Force Huddleston, after its CEO, Colonel D.H. Huddleston, assigned to cover the High Vosges forests, hills, and mountains. The German plan was solid, but their troops were short on supplies, worn out, and could not train for or rehearse the attack, or even reconnoiter the American positions for fear that Allied air supremacy would spot their deployments. It didn't matter. The Americans knew the Germans were coming. After the crushing intelligence failure that opened the Battle of the Bulge, American reconnaissance planes, British radio intercept teams, and Bletchley Park codebreakers were reading German Enigma messages to determine Hitler's intentions. It was clear that the Germans were going to attack in the first hours of the new year. Patch summoned his commanders on New Year's Eve to inform them and forbid any celebrations for the 7th Army. He did not want the Germans attacking hung-over troops. On December 26th, Allied Supreme Commander General Dwight Eisenhower summoned Devers to his Paris headquarters to discuss how the 6th Army Group would face the impending attack. Eisenhower was more concerned about losing casualties and wasting valuable supplies than holding ground. The Alsace salient was a burden on his overstretched lines. He told Devers to be prepared to withdraw as far as the Modder River and, if necessary, yield Strasbourg.
Devers was not happy with the decisions, particularly the last one. He had strong faith in his men. Furthermore, holding Strasbourg was a major humanitarian and political issue. The city was sacred to France for being taken by Prussia in 1870. The lost Alsace-Lorraine had dominated French military and political thinking since then and through the Great War. One of France's great children's stories, taught in every classroom, was The Last Lesson, in which a teacher in Strasbourg delivers his final class in French before having to yield his post and the school to the Prussians in the morning. Now 150,000 Frenchmen, many Alsatians of wavering views, lived in Strasbourg. Ceding the city could lead to bloodshed on a massive scale as Nazis and their sympathizers attacked de Gaulle followers. He was a major problem too. As head of the new French state, de Gaulle was concerned about the fate of his citizens. In addition, if Strasbourg were yielded to the Nazis without a fight, it would be a major loss of prestige for his government. He might lose power to his communist rivals, who made up the backbone of the French resistance, despite his efforts to rein it in. Both Devers and de Gaulle appealed to Eisenhower to keep troops in Alsace and Strasbourg ahead of New Year's Eve, but got no answer before 11 p.m. on December 31st, when German artillery in the West Wall opened fire on American positions as Nordwind began under a bright moon. German Nebelwerfer, screaming Nimis to the Americans, rocket launchers lit up the sky with their short-range missiles. German infantry stormed American positions, yelling "Heil Hitler! Down with Roosevelt!" A GI on the receiving end of this verbal assault said it sounded like a Republican convention.
First hit was Task Force Huddleston, the seam between the 15th and 6th Corps. The Americans often had difficulty assembling ad hoc task forces during the war, and this was just such an example. It consisted mostly of armored cars and light tanks from 12th Armored Division and was unable to maneuver off-road. Still, they were dug in with machine guns, trip flares, and minefields. 4 German Volksgrenadier divisions started the action by probing and finding holes in the thin American line. In their weight snowsuits, the German attackers poured through the holes, yelling, "Hold your fire," in English. The Americans did, thinking the snowsuit-covered apparitions were fellow dog-faces or surrendering Germans, until the Volksgrenadiers opened fire. The Americans fought back. Even cooks and clerks grabbed rifles and went into the line, but couldn't hold. The Americans started running out of ammunition and fled in small groups, leaving their vehicles behind in varying states of effectiveness. By dawn, Task Force Huddleston had ceased to exist as a fighting force. As they retreated, they also discovered that numbers of the Alsatian population, being German, were hostile. A French woman who had been friendly to the Americans up to this point opened fire on the fleeing GIs with a rifle. The Americans cut her to pieces with a .50 caliber machine gun. On the extreme American left, the 36th Volksgrenadiers and the 17th SS Division attacked the New York and New Jersey National Guardsmen of the 44th Infantry. SS troops, some of them drunk or high on Benzedrine, yelled, "Die, Yankee bastards," and "Come and fight, Yankee gangsters," as they attacked. The 44th held its ground as night turned to day. The American 749th Tank Battalion joined in counterattacks, scything through the Volksgrenadiers. The Germans hit back with some troops from the 17th SS Panzer Grenadiers, but they proved as incompetent as ever. German dead piled up below American positions on the high ground. GIs called the area beneath them Morgue Valley. Amid the night fighting, Sergeant Charles A. Magnified, a Canadian-born guardsman who lived in Boston, led a squad of infantry of the 71st Regiment of the 44th to meet the German attack and displayed extraordinary courage against the enemy. He received the Medal of Honor from President Harry Truman on August 23, 1945 at the White House, returned to Massachusetts, died in 2000, and is buried in Arlington National Cemetery. Other defenders proved equally ferocious. Private Leon Outlaw cut down more than 100 attackers with his .30 caliber water-cooled machine gun.
On the right flank, the 6th Corps faced a German advance over the Alsace plain with fewer troops, holding a long line. Brooks reacted to the Nazi attacks swiftly. he had two task forces, Linden and Heron, keeping watch on the Rhine. These two task forces were the infantry components of the 42nd and 70th Infantry Divisions, respectively, which meant they lacked their divisions supporting artillery, armor, and engineers. Their infantry had not seen battle either, but they were trained, equipped, and available. Brooks appreciated from intelligence and weather conditions that the Germans on the east side of the Rhine were in no shape to mount any kind of major crossing, so he pulled the two task forces out of their mission and sent them north to reinforce the battered divisions 45th and 79th.
The 45th Division, Brooks had one of the best in the Army. The Thunderbirds of Texas and New Mexico had fought with valor in Sicily and Italy. The 45th Division's CO, Major General Robert T. Frederick, one of the Army's youngest, had previously commanded the legendary Black Devils, the U.S.-Canadian 1st Special Service Force, leading it from the front. Maneuvering his men dexterously, Frederick and the understrength 45th held off German attacks. The Germans facing them were poorly briefed and not well trained, a bad combination for an offensive.
Frederick moved with his usual alacrity as he shifted the 179th Infantry Regiment from his far right to his left flank, and put the 36th Combat Engineers in on the right, along with 2 battalions from the 79th. German troops from the 90th Corps' 257th Volksgrenadier Division attacked into the many villages and towns on the Alsace plain, and house-to-house fighting raged all day along a 12-mile curving line. German pressure was heavy. Frederick ordered 2 regiments to pull back to a new line of resistance in the Maginot fortifications. Word of this fresh German attack landed on Eisenhower's desk in Paris, along with a great deal of other bad news that morning. The Battle of the Bulge was continuing, supplies were short, and the Luftwaffe had launched a massive dawn aerial assault on Allied air bases in Belgium and Holland, destroying 134 Allied aircraft for a loss of 220. Eisenhower's offer to a pardon to GI convicted of murder and rape if they emerged from stockades to fill manpower gaps in rifle companies had gone mostly ignored. Now Devers' troops were ignoring his plan to withdraw. Eisenhower sent Devers a hard message, insisting that Patch pull back as far as possible. 6th Corps was not to be caught on the Alsatian plain and destroyed. If necessary, they were to pull back as far as the Modder River. But Eisenhower did release the 12th and 14th Armored and the 36th Infantry Divisions from his reserves.
To make matters worse, de Gaulle demanded Eisenhower personally guarantee the defense of Strasbourg. De Gaulle sent Marshal Alphonse Juin, head of the Forces Françaises Intérieures, which commanded the resistance, to meet with Eisenhower's Chief of Staff, General Walter Bedell Smith. They met on January 2, and the discussion did not go well. As tempers rose, Juin threatened to take the French First Army out of the Allied command and order it to hold Strasbourg on its own. Smith roared back at this insubordination, shouting, "The French First Army will not get a single further round of ammunition or a gallon of gasoline. In that case, General de Gaulle will forbid American forces the use of French railways and communications," Juin retorted. Smith backed down, but the battle between allies was not over. Nor was the battle on the Alsatian front. The gap created by the collapse of Task Force Huddleston allowed German troops to pour through it on January 1 and 2, threatening to cut off the 100th Infantry on their right and the 45th Division on their left. The 44th rallied, counterattacked, and then retreated again.
Nor was the battle on the Alsatian front. The gap created by the collapse of Task Force Huddleston allowed German troops to pour through it on January 1 and 2, threatening to cut off the 100th Infantry on their right and the 45th Division on their left. The 44th rallied, counterattacked, and then retreated again. Determined to hold his ground, Hyslop sent in his reserve, the French 2nd Armored Combat Command L, whose Sherman tanks and mechanized infantry stemmed the German attack. The Nazis tried to split the seam between the 44th and 100th Divisions, using captured Sherman tanks to fool the Americans. But as weather improved west of the Vosges, American air power made its presence felt, blasting open German positions, troop concentrations, and supply columns. The German First Army's Assistant Chief Operations Officer, Colonel Albert Emmerich, reported on the 13th SS Corps' attack harshly, saying that it had, under incompetent leadership, in the meantime been completely dispersed. Probably because of the insufficient training of the Vosges Artillery Corps, the coordination between the attacking infantry and the supporting artillery was only rarely achieved, so that the artillery support, which was actually strong, did not show its effectiveness either. The assault west of the Vosges was called off on January 4, but harsh fighting continued there. On the night of January 8th, Tech Sergeant Charles Carey, an Oklahoma native in the 397th Infantry Regiment, 100th Infantry Division, gave his life defending against 200 German infantrymen and a dozen tanks. He received a posthumous Medal of Honor and is buried in the American Cemetery in Neuville-in-Condrois, Belgium.
But in the 6th Corps sector, a bitter struggle and retreat was the order of the day. Patch and Brooks struggled to disentangle the 45th, 79th, and 70th Infantry Divisions, Task Force Heron, on narrow Alsatian roads jammed with fleeing refugees. Brooks moved Heron to plug up the eastern exits from the Vosges, with Frederick in overall command. In the center, 2 regiments of the 45th and 1 of the 79th dug in to face the German second wave. Patch made another important move. He pulled the 103rd Infantry Division out from his left flank and to the right flank of Hayslip's command to relieve Task Force Heron, which was running out of men. The 103rd was a fairly new division, but it had superb leadership in Brigadier General Anthony McAuliffe, who had led the 101st Airborne Division in its stand at Bastogne. Command of the 103rd was the quiet paratroopers' reward. The 103rd dug in and held the line. Fierce fighting raged at Philipsburg, where the 12th Hellcats Armored Division had been released from Schaeff's reserve to face the German onslaught. Among them was a Los Angelino PFC named George B. Turner of the 499th Armored Field Artillery, who survived a harrowing overnight ordeal after covering the retreat of several soldiers forced to abandon damaged armored vehicles and suffering a serious wound. Turner received the Medal of Honor on August 23, 1945. He died in 1963 and is buried in Arlington National Cemetery. On January 3rd, General de Vigier, the French military governor of Strasbourg, sent an impassioned plea to Patch's headquarters at Luneville, imploring 7th Army not to abandon the city. While Patch digested this message, Devers turned up and ordered Strasbourg evacuated regardless of any political pressure to hold the city. Meanwhile, de Gaulle himself took his protests to Eisenhower, admitting that the military plan made sense, but the loss of Strasbourg would be a political disaster for France. With Winston Churchill present as both witness and potential mediator, de Gaulle presented Eisenhower with a letter threatening to use the French army to independently defend the city if necessary.
A great military politician, Eisenhower told de Gaulle that he would modify his orders to ensure that Strasbourg would be defended, but he would not tolerate French insubordination to the Allied command. If de Gaulle removed his troops from Eisenhower's command, the French would not get a single bullet or gallon of gas from his depots. De Gaulle agreed. Studying his maps, de Gaulle ordered the French First Army to send the 3rd Algerian Division, a veteran but understrength outfit, like most of the units fighting in Alsace-Lorraine, to Strasbourg with orders to hold the city. Meanwhile, Eisenhower ordered Devers to limit Brooks's withdrawal to a point north of Strasbourg. Then, Churchill and the 2 generals had dinner.
Meanwhile, Frederick fought grim battles in small towns with names that his Thunderbirds would never forget, as they and their buddies would take heavy casualties struggling to knock out German assault guns and defeat Volksgrenadier and 6th SS attacks. Frederick moved more troops to his left to face both the SS men and the 361st Volksgrenadier Division, whose 951st Volksgrenadier Regiment was facing his troops. The 2 forces collided head-on, and the Germans were repulsed at every point, leaving the 12th SS Mountain Regiment at Vingen-sur-Moder surrounded. With a fanaticism born of both desperation and being SS, a number of the trapped German troops were able to fight their way out. On January 4th, the 275th Regiment's 1st Battalion, 70th Infantry Division, attacked Philipsburg, backed by heavy artillery fire. The regiment's executive officer, Lieutenant Colonel John T. Malloy, found 75 men and some tanks clinging to the edge of town, ready to withdraw, but rallied them. The struggle for Philipsburg continued on the 5th, with American artillery and armor making its presence felt. The SS defenders were forced to withdraw. Yet German hopes remained high, with reports from Himmler that American defenders were thinning out at Strasbourg. The Nazi High Command committed the 21st Panzer and 25th Panzer Grenadier on the night of January 5th to cross the Rhine and be ready to attack across the Alsatian plain, under the command of the 39th Panzer Corps. Eisenhower considered this the most dangerous move the Germans could make in Alsace. The same day, Himmler hurled his Army Group Oberrhein into the attack from the Colmar Pocket, with SS General Otto von Dambach-Zaleski's 14th SS Corps leading the way in by crossing the Rhine River under light American opposition. Bach-Zaleski was Hitler's model anti-partisan fighter, having crushed the Warsaw Uprising in August. 2 days later, Operation Sonnenwende, Winter Solstice, got underway with the German 64th Corps attacking north to Strasbourg. The attacks meant that Patch could not gain any relief from his French troops in the south.
Devers now faced attacks on his right and left with only his stretched-out 7th Army. Fortunately, he had ultra-intelligence reports providing him with up-to-date information on German strength and movements, enabling him to spot his forces. To the 79th Infantry Division under Major General Ira Weich, he assigned Task Force Linden and moved them to the road from Weiersheim to Gamsheim. The 79th was named the Cross of Lorraine Division from its previous incarnation in World War I, having won battles there. Brooks told Weich, "Get in there and get it cleaned up. It's got to be cleaned up pronto. We can't let them get in there." Weich attacked at 3:45 p.m. straight into the Germans and became bogged down in darkness and machine gun fire. Soon, Weich's attack was completely stalled. Frederick assigned Colonel Malloy to set matters straight. He found tank commanders refusing to advance. Malloy whipped out his .45 and ordered them to do so at gunpoint. Then, Malloy personally took charge of the attack, with one of his lieutenants firing a light machine gun from the hip like a pistol. "Who is that crazy guy?" Malloy yelled. "Let's get him a medal." Malloy's ferocity worked, although he took a wound in the shoulder, then in the leg. Medics took Malloy out of the battle, but he had won the point and the day. Meanwhile, the Germans had cut holes in the snowy American lines and brought their armored units into play. First up was the 21st Panzer Division, one of Germany's most unusual such outfits. The original 21st Panzer Division had fought in North Africa and been destroyed there. Its number was given to a new Panzer Division formed in France to face the Allied invasion in 1944. Many of its vehicles were war booty. On D-Day, the division's CO, Lieutenant General Edgar Feuchtinger, was in Paris with his mistress, a French actress. Lacking leadership, the division responded sluggishly and was unable to break through to the British beaches. Feuchtinger's superiors demanded to know why the top panzer commander had failed his most important job. Feuchtinger admitted to being an opportunist Nazi who had planned major party rallies before the war, not generalship. He claimed his only maps of France were from the 1870 Franco-Prussian War. Feuchtinger's superiors didn't believe that one, and on January 5, 1945, they arrested the general for deserting his post on D-Day, which, along with misappropriation of Wehrmacht funds and giving secrets to his new South American mistress, resulted in 21st Panzer being unable to attack. Feuchtinger was sentenced to death at court-martial and stripped of all his medals, but Hitler intervened, busting the general to artillery private and sending him to the 20th Panzer Grenadier Division on the Eastern Front. Feuchtinger deserted instead and survived the war.
The effect of this high-level court-martial was also to delay 21st Panzer's assault until January 7th, when it attacked Task Force Linden, which was reinforced by the 12th Armored Division. The Americans also held Maginot Line's strongpoints. Facing fixed defenses, mobile Sherman tanks, well-placed mines, as well as a heavy mist, the German attack stalled. By January 8th, the 553rd Volksgrenadier Division, the cutting edge of the otherwise weak 14th SS Corps, had fought its way across the Rhine to the town of Herlesheim, cutting the north-south road. It was now reinforced by one of the tougher SS outfits, the 10th SS Hohenstaufen Panzer Division, which had fought in Normandy and Holland, but not the Bulge. The Americans mustered 2 task forces from the 12th and 14th Armored Divisions to tear apart the bridgehead. In what became known as Purple Heart Lane, a wild battle ensued as the Americans did not expect to find SS men. The Americans fought their way into Herlesheim, and on the following day the 12th Armored's Combat Command B, CCB, stormed in, using tanks to provide fire support for infantry. They didn't find SS troops, but the 5th 53rd Volksgrenadiers proved tough enough. American radio communications then broke down, and several of the Sherman tanks milling about outside the town were eviscerated by German 88mm guns. When dusk fell, the GIs withdrew, though harsh fighting continued in the town for 4 days. The German assault in the Alsace Plain continued on January 7th, with 21st Panzer and 25th Panzer Grenadier trying again. Blaskowitz was unhappy with 2 elite panzer divisions failing to break through slapped-together American task forces, and made his displeasure known by personally visiting the 21st Panzer's tactical HQ, where he warned the 39th Panzer Corps CO, General Karl Decker, and the 21st's acting CO, Lieutenant Colonel Hans von Luck, that Feuchtinger's cell at Torgau prison had 2 empty cots.
The 2 German senior officers, in turn, pointed out that the American opponents, a portion of the famed 42nd Rainbow Infantry Division, still Task Force Linden, were holding a portion of the Maginot Line with heavy artillery and tank support. Just to make things worse, von Luck had no up-to-date maps of the battle area. Neither Blaskowitz nor Decker could help von Luck. They didn't have good maps either. But Decker and von Luck attacked with ample determination on the 9th, driving on the 242nd Infantry Regiment's 1st Battalion at Hatton. The 25th Panzer Grenadier led the way with its tough infantrymen infiltrating around pillboxes. The Americans stabilized the situation with mortar fire, but the Germans hit back with flamethrower tanks. That forced one American bunker to surrender, and most of Company B was overrun. The 1st Battalion CO told his company commanders to let the tanks pass, but kill the German infantrymen. 3 German tanks approached 1st Battalion's command post, but the leading Panther was stopped by mines. The other 2, unable to advance, hurled shells at the CP. Captain Herr of the 21st led an assault group of engineers and 12 Panther tanks against an American bunker and forced its surrender, blasting 3 Sherman tanks and taking many prisoners. The Americans treated the Germans to a heavy artillery barrage that forced them to withdraw. With the support of 20 fresh assault guns from Germany, Herr tried again, on a cold, snowy night. Neither he nor his men could see the GIs in the moonless dark. German soldiers aged 16 and 17 struggled toward a silent bunker. There was no incoming fire, so a German NCO simply banged on the door. It opened slowly, enabling the Germans to take the GIs prisoner. But the noise alerted the other bunker crews, who opened fire on the attackers, joined by heavy artillery, stalling further German advance. The Nazis kept trying, with the 25th Panzer Grenadiers joining in, to little avail. Another German attack, led by more than 25 tanks, enveloped the town and reached the area south of Rittershoffen. The Americans sent in the 14th Armored Division's 48th Tank Battalion to stop the German assault.
The German attack across the Moder River had completely failed, and even Hitler had to recognize that Nordwind had become a disaster, doing so on the 25th, ordering the offensive halted after the last attacks. The offensive had failed to gain Strasbourg, failed to cut off the 6th Army Group, and failed to draw in American reserves from the equally failing Ardennes offensive. All that could be shown for it were 25,000 German casualties. The Americans had suffered about 15,000. Just to make the offensive even more pointless, while 4 German armored divisions, a mountain division, and a parachute division were expending themselves fruitlessly in Alsace, and as the Anglo-Americans were grinding down the Germans in the Ardennes,
the Soviet Union unleashed a massive offensive on January 12th, its greatest of the war. In a week, the Red Army was within 100 miles of Berlin. Hitler had no choice. He began withdrawing his panzer troops to face the eastern Hegira, leaving behind Volksgrenadiers and their Panzerfausts to prevent an American 7th Army drive into the recaptured area. Having dismissed Blaskowitz's earlier messages as pessimistic, he dismissed Blaskowitz on January 27th in a shuffle of generals that sent him to command the defense of the Netherlands. The 7th Army needed to shorten its line and recover. As the Bulge was erased, Patton's 3rd Army resumed its old positions and prepared its long-planned drive into the Saar. Patch received the 10th Armored Division to strengthen his line. Task Force Linden became the 42nd Infantry Division. Task Force Harris became the 63rd, and Task Force Heron the 70th, as their proper backing arrived. Finally, the American 101st Airborne Division, fresh from its epic stand at Bastogne, was brought down to defend the Moder River, relieving the 42nd in the 79th Infantry Divisions. The American paratroopers outclassed the German Volksgrenadiers they faced in every way. The battle was a great triumph for the 7th Army. It was the first time they had faced real engagements with attacking German forces equal or superior to their own, as the U.S. Army official history, Riviera to the Rhine, noted. American leadership from Devers down to regimental commanders had been deft and kept pace with the German moves. The average GI fought well.
The Nordwind offensive was poorly planned, badly fought, and completely failed. It only proved two things: that American soldiers, from generals to privates, were courageous, adaptable, and skillful, and that, as 13th Corps Commander SS Gen Max Simon tartly observed when his attack was stopped, German troops knew how to fight and how to die, and little else. The American theory won wars. The German theory did not.
If you enjoyed the video, please support us by subscribe and like. This will help us continue our work and provide the best historical reports on World War II. Thank you for watching the video until the end.